Recording and streaming.
Good morning. Y'all are quiet today. I was almost thinking Karen wasn't here. Oh, there she is. We love each other, don't we, Karen? Yes, we do. All right. I know, it's just back and forth, you know. First, I wanted to thank you again for surprising me last week. That was a really nice surprise. And what I didn't mention was that in addition to Donna giving me a card from the group, Courtney had also made that big card that all of y'all signed, and she brought it to me, so that was very thoughtful for all of you, so thank you so much for that. I felt loved. Loved, loved, loved. Okay, fairest Lord Jesus. Fairest Lord Jesus, ruler of all nature, O thou of God and man the Son, thee will I cherish, thee will I honor, thou my soul's glory, joy, and crown. Fair are the meadows, fair still the woodlands, robed in the blooming garb of spring. Jesus is pure, who makes the woeful heart to sing. Beautiful Savior, Lord of the nations, Son of God and Son of man, glory and honor, praise, adoration, now and forevermore be thine. Good job. I love that song. Thanks, Courtney. We also want to give a big welcome to Emily. She's here for the first time. Emily, this is Emily right here. We're so grateful for Emily to be with us today. So my trivia question this week, I laugh because I felt like I had to pick a second one because I feel like this is too hard, but I'm going to do it anyway because Brittany nor Gail could figure it out. But I think y'all are smarter than Brittany and Gail. If they're watching, sorry. So we'll see. And if not, then I have if we not, then I have a second one. Okay. These two men, and their names aren't important, but I'll tell them to you anyway. Mark Chavanez and Alfred Fielding. They created something. The something is the answer. After experimenting unsuccessfully with an idea for plastic textured wallpaper. They were trying to figure out this wallpaper that was plastic and textured, and it didn't work, so this came about because of that. Anybody have any ideas, Shirley?
Kiddo.
Huh?
Kiddo.
What is kiddo?
Kiddo.
Kid.
Early,
Oh, like Play-Doh?
Like Play-Doh.
Oh, no. No, think of something that is plastic and textured. Plastic and textured. Debbie?
Velcro.
Nope.
Glue.
Huh?
Glue.
Nope. It's a toughie. I got a second.
Plaster Paris or something like that?
Nope. When I give it to you, you're going to be, oh, okay, that makes sense. But I'm going to let you, if you want to try to guess one more. Yes, Karen?
Silly putty?
No. Plastic textured wallpaper that didn't work turned into bubble wrap. Bubble wrap. Plastic textured. Yes, plastic textured. Bubble wrap. Yes. This guy knew, nobody else knows. Okay, so this is a little bit easier, and this is one that you can take a guess at and get it. But remember, you get one guess. So raise your hand, you get one guess. Okay. Walking on your toes, like a ballerina, takes more energy than walking normally, but how much percent more energy than walking normally? Walking on your toes requires blank percent more energy than walking normally. Just guess a number. Donna?
80.
Okay.
75.
75. Connie?
1.
No. Karen?
60%.
No. Yes, sir.
300?
No. I'm going to give it to Donna because it was very close. It was 83%. 83%. She can't, she just got back from a cruise, right?
Yeah.
When she comes in, let's all clap.
Shall we pipe her aboard?
Yes. Our speaker has arrived.
Yeah.
All right, Donna, it's all yours, friend.
Take it away.
Donna.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Excuse me. Okay. A little boy writes a letter to God. A little boy wants $100 very badly and prays for weeks, but nothing happened. Then he decides to write God a letter requesting $100. When the postal authorities received the letter addressed to God, USA, they decided to send it to the president. The president was so amused that he instructed his secretary to send the little boy a $5 bill. The president figured this would appear to be a lot of money to a little boy. The little boy was delighted with the $5 bill and sat down and wrote a thank you note to God, which read, "Dear God, thank you very much for sending the money. However, I noticed that for some reason you sent it through Washington, D.C. You know those, I won't use the party, the Washington Democrats, I'm sorry, that's what it says, deducted $95 in taxes." Okay, a little political there, but I started to change it and say something different, and I was like, oh, what the heck.
We can stand it.
Yes. Okay, black and white wedding. Attending a wedding for the first time, a little girl whispered to her mom, "Why is the bride dressed in white?" "Because white is the color of happiness, and today is the happiest day of her life." The child thought for a few minutes, then said, "So why is the groom wearing black?" These are little short jokes. One Sunday, a pastor told the congregation that the church needed some extra money and asked the people to prayerfully consider giving a little extra in the offering plate. He said that whoever gave the most would be able to pick out 3 hymns. After the offering plate was passed, the pastor glanced down and noticed that someone had placed $1,000 bill in the offering. He was so excited that he immediately shared his joy with the congregation and said he'd like to personally thank the person who placed the money in the plate. A very quiet, elderly, saintly lady all the way in the back shyly raised her hand. The pastor asked her to come to the front. Slowly she made her way to the pastor. He told her how wonderful it was that she gave so much, and in thanksgiving asked her to pick out 3 hymns. Her eyes brightened as she looked all over the congregation, pointed to 3 handsome men in the building, and said, "I'll take him, him, and him." I know some of these are kind of corny, but anyhow. And a new minister stood at the church door greeting the members as they left the Sunday morning service. Most of the people were very generous, telling the new minister how much they liked his message, except for one man who said, This was a very dull and boring sermon, Pastor. A few minutes later, the same man again appeared to the line and said, I don't think you did much preparation for your message. Once again the man appeared, this time murmuring, you really blew it. You didn't have a thing to say. Finally, the minister could stand it no longer. He went to one of the deacons and inquired about the man. Oh, don't let that guy bother you, said the deacon. He's a little slow. All he does is go around repeating whatever he hears from the other people. Gotta be careful what you say. Okay, life is short, times are tough. Today, why don't you smile a little bigger, love a little deeper, laugh a little louder, pray a little longer, and trust God for better days ahead.
Amen.
Very good.
Howdy, everybody. I might be in the minority here of preachers, but I always like hearing genuine comments, and I mean that from people who listen to me. I actually had a really good comment yesterday. I worked some overtime yesterday with my coworker, and he's actually one of my managers. And we had 50-something boxes of shoes, not boxes of shoes, boxes of shoes. And everybody who was the other two that were working on it left about 11:30, and him and I were there till 3 o'clock, okay? And we started just before 6. So a lot of shoes to process, we were doing it. And he said something, because we chatted the whole time, he said, because he said, you're a preacher and all. I said, yeah. And he goes, it's funny because I've been under preachers, and when they talk, you get bored and you get tired sometimes. And he says, but it's funny talking to you. He said, you have a manner of speaking and the words that you choose. He says, I actually really enjoy just listening to hear you talk. I said, well, I appreciate that. And he's a young guy. He's only 24. And he said, so for someone from Gen X, he's like, I just want you to know that you hit me in the right spot. I was like, well, I appreciate that. So I've heard boring, and I appreciate that too, because it means you're at least listening enough to go, oh, I'm disengaged. Yeah, so, and I mean that, yeah. Okay, so 2 weeks ago I said, homework for 2 weeks. You've had 2 weeks to do it. I want your essays now. So 2 weeks, yeah, you all did it last night. So who went through and kind of just looked at the Beatitudes there, the rest of them that we had, and okay, just kind of like thought of some things maybe that were self-applicable? Good. Okay, so again, when we're going through this, we're looking at kind of that Hebrew duality. So there's something that happens, and then there's effect. So a cause, and then an effect, okay? And I want you, as we think about the ones that we did 2 weeks ago, I want you to think about as we go through these as well. Remember, there's two sides to each one of these, okay? There's a component on one side and there's a component on another, and they both have something similar. So like the ones on the right side will say, okay, the for, theirs, blah, blah, blah. That has a certain component to it, and then all the blesseds are the something. They have a sort of component. So I want you to think about that. Put your cap on today and really focus on that as we go through these. Could someone read, let's go 7 through 12.
Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. Righteousness. Oh, I shouldn't turn that. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
Yes, I apologize. Matthew 5. We're in. Okay, so let's start at verse 7. Blessed are the merciful. What does merciful mean? Let's go with just mercy. What is mercy? Compassion.
Empathetic.
Empathetic.
Forgiving.
Forgiving. Can you give me an example? Not a Bible example. Give me a real life example of mercy.
A real life example.
Real life example of mercy.
I think, of me personally,
It could be you or just a general example.
well, I think about when I got divorced from my husband. And, that was a hard thing to get over, and it took many years. But I finally got to the point that I could be forgiving and loving again. And, I mean, we were married for over 30 years when we got separated and then ultimately divorced. But there still is that seed of love in my heart.
For that individual.
Right.
That's good.
For
I like
the
that.
person that he was, not the person he is now.
For what he was.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's think of mercy. Something that could be merciful. I'll give you an example. And this is one for my elders, a preacher buddy of mine in Ohio. When he said this, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Mercy and grace, oftentimes we conflate the two. They're not the same. They're different. Very different. So, I'm driving 95 miles an hour down a city street that's limited at 25. Cop pulls me over. Justice dictates 95, I'm arresting you, you're going to jail, that's reckless driving. I say, officer, I'm really, really sorry. I've never done anything like this before. It was a really nice car, it's something new, I just wanted to get that engine going. And the officer says, here's mercy. Justice is getting arrested. Mercy is okay. I'm letting you off with a warning. Do not do that again. Mercy. It's not the absence of justice. It's justice set aside. Here's grace. He says, not only am I going to give you a warning, let me go buy you an ice cream cone.
What?
Oh, all right.
I'll buy it for you. I'll take you to lunch. Let's go have lunch and have a chit-chat. That's grace.
Wow.
Mercy is undeserved, putting aside justice. Mercy is grace is something given extra to you. So when you think of mercy, mercy is where, in this instance, someone has divorced, someone has wronged you and hurt you, and yet instead of the justice of, I'm going to hold that against you, you say, you know what, I'm going to cancel it on their account. That's mercy. Think of that. Merciful, for they will receive mercy. Think of every time that you read in Scripture where it talks about forgiveness, how those who are forgiven much will also forgive much. That's the same idea here. If you are merciful to people, you're not looking to just always give them justice. They need justice. They hurt me. They hurt that person. But instead, being merciful and saying, you know what, I'm going to take that justice and set it aside. That's mercy, whether they deserve it or not. That's mercy. Okay? How about pure in heart? What is pure in heart? What does that mean? Okay, let's break it down. What is purity? Clean. What'd you say?
Right.
Something right. What else? What purity? Clean. How about think of what is the opposite of pure?
No flaws.
No flaws. Okay, so something that is pure is 100% uncontaminated. There is no flaw. There is nothing incorrect in it. Okay, when you think of, I personally think of a sphere, like a marble. Now we can't perceive any flaws in it. It is perfect. It is pure. It is cylindrical fashion. Okay. However, if you go microscopic, there are little flaws, but we can't see those. Okay. So we would say that that's a pure sphere, right? What is heart? What does that mean? What is heart? Don't think physically. Think beyond the physical. What is your heart?
Your deep feelings.
Deep feelings. Okay. Good. That's
Could
good.
it be soul?
Soul.
Soul.
What does soul do?
Well, that's what you are, what you think. how
What you think,
What you do.
what you
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
okay? So we have deep feelings, how you feel, what you think, what you do,
Who you are.
who you are. What else could heart be? So we have like mind sort of thoughts. How about your will, your volition? The things that you want to do, not just the things you do or think, but what you want to do. That's what the word heart here means, and throughout Matthew. The word heart there is sort of the inner part of you. Heart is sort of not here, but here, in your gut. What is causing you to move forward? Okay? So thinking of that, pure, unflawed, uncontaminated heart, volition, feelings, what moves you forward. What is pure in heart then?
Your thoughts, how you think, or how you do.
Give me an example of that. Give me a real world example of something that's pure in heart, or something that is done in a pure of heart way.
When you give something to somebody and don't want nothing back in return.
Right?
Yeah. Hey,
Now, why would you do that? What is the reason that you're doing that? Love. What else? What could be another reason to do it?
We're called to be a servant.
Called to be a servant? What else? Why would we give to someone that we don't believe deserves it, or regardless of that, we give to them not expecting anything in return?
being gracious.
Being gracious? How about because we think it's the right thing to do? Our volition, our will, our heart is to do what we think is right. That's typically called morality. In this case, it's a pure morality, one that lines up with God. So in thinking of that, that thing that moves you forward, your morality, your will, your thoughts, your emotions, they're pure, so they have to be aligned with what? With God's what?
With God's love and God's holiness,
God's holiness, His will, His purpose. So when you think of what Jesus says about being in His will, in God's will, that's the idea. Everything that moves you forward being pure, being holy, being something that is set on God's wants and not my wants. Not something that I wish, but something that God wishes. Okay? And if you have those, what do you get? Verse 8. Pure in heart, what happens?
See God.
You see God. What do you mean see God? How do you see God?
He interacts with your spiritual being. He, I guess, your conscious, you're not personally ain't going to see him physically.
Are you sure about that?
Well, in heaven you will.
Well, in heaven, yeah. But
Think about some of the other ones we've seen. They'll receive mercy. They will be satisfied. They'll inherit the earth. Do these things happen now? Not necessarily. This is talking about a contrast. I don't want to spoil it. It's a contrast here, okay? So let's look at the next one, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers. What is a peacemaker?
Someone who makes peace.
Okay, someone who makes peace. Give me an illustration. Illustrate that for me.
I always think of somebody on Dennis Berry. Whenever there's a conflict, he comes in the middle and tries to make peace with people within conflict. Tries to make peace with those people. Tries to see a
good
peaceful way out of it instead of trying to resolve a conflict.
So a good arbitrator.
Yeah.
Okay.
When your children are having a fuss between the two of them, you step in and try to straighten them out, figure out why they're doing it, and calm them down.
Okay, Donna.
Sometimes, my husband is kind of headstrong and I'm a lot more easier going. And sometimes he will, just get annoyed about something or whatever. And instead of fighting or coming back, I usually say, you all don't find this funny, but I say, your hair looks nice, and I walk away.
Now, which one of those is incumbent upon a person in a volatile situation? The arbiter, the person that's outside of it, or someone who's inside the conflict?
What was
What it would be better, what would it be better to be? The arbiter is the peacemaker, someone who's a third party to the conflict, or someone who's in the midst of it?
Someone who's in the midst.
The person who's in the midst of it. When they're the peacemaker, that's where it's beneficial. Okay? Again, Bible illustration, Jesus. He's going to get crucified, all this stuff. If he wants to be a warmonger and he wants to, again, ensure justice upon those who are putting him on the cross, he could call all these angels, wipe them out. Okay, that's justice. And yet, he wants to make peace, not for himself, but for us. So he seeks that, and it means it costs him something. In these situations, sometimes it might cost you something. I know with my wife, sometimes it costs what I want to say, sure, let's do this. Okay? That's seeking peace. You don't seek disruption constantly. Okay? I like certain songs, like what we sang today. I love that hymn. It's a beautiful hymn. I think that the instrumentation is wonderful. It flows beautifully for me, okay? The harmonies are great. And yet we sometimes play, contemporary stuff for the majority of it. I would rather have that. However, to make peace, I say, you know what? That's okay. That still serves a purpose. Even though I desire this, I get it on Wednesdays, and once in a while they play one in there, but I don't require that. So I'm not going to make a fuss for some stupid reason. I just make peace. Not raising Cain, not making waves, but seeking a peace. And not just a peace that says, well, fine, I just won't say anything. That's not peace, because then you don't have peace. It's being peace across the board. You make peace with them, and you are at peace. And what's the result of that? When you make peace?
They'll be called sons of God.
Sons of God. Christians are to seek peace. We're not supposed to be disruptive or divisive or have denominations or you do this and that. We're being called to one mind. One mind. That's being at peace. A still lake. I've rarely in my life ever seen a body of water that was 100% peaceful. I mean 100%. Typically, there's always, because you can see how the sun shines on it, some little ripple here, a little teeny wave here. But when you see it, it's usually like in a puddle. And it's just flat. And the light hits it, and you see a perfect little reflection with no disruption. It's so pretty because it's an exact mirror, And I think of heaven like that. If it's at peace, it's mirroring heaven just perfectly. Okay? So think of that. When you think of making peace, think of reflecting God in that, like a still body of water. Perfect reflection of the heavens. All right, verse 10. Persecuted for righteousness. What is being persecuted for righteousness? Well, let's talk about persecution. Are Christians persecuted in this country?
Yes.
How?
They're mocked. People mock them.
How do they mock us?
Oh, they think you think you're better than everybody because you're Bible thumper and all this other kind of stuff. They mock you because you walk in a different way of life than they do, and you don't fit with them, and they don't fit with you, so they're going to mock you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so they mock.
Yeah.
They've taken things out of the public school. My grandchildren, some of them go to public school, and teachers, they're not supposed to, but a lot of them do, share their faith, their Christianity class. You're not supposed to, but a lot of them do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
it's, like anything goes, basically. I think it's all about the LBGT or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, that they almost have more rights than, other
Christians.
Christians.
Okay.
There have been a lot of Christians jailed in this country, recent months, like 84-year-old grandmother that was praying outside an abortion clinic to herself, that they knew what she was doing, and she was arrested.
Was that the one in London? I know there was one that happened in London, like a year ago, that I watched a video of where she was arrested because she'd been told not to be there, but she was across the street praying. And they took that as a threat or something
Right,
ridiculous.
there've been a number of different individuals that have been arrested. Kind of get some things from some of the freedom bodies that
Right.
they're talking about. The one man had many children, but he was acquitted because he was praying outside.
Oh, wow. What else? How else are we persecuted?
I don't really think that I've ever been persecuted for righteousness, and that kind of makes me feel bad because it seems like maybe I'm not as righteous as I should be.
When we think about what Joe said, using that, when we think about what Joe said, they think we're high and mighty, okay? What typically are they used to seeing outside of abortion clinics?
Protest.
Protests. What else?
Protest.
What do they hold?
Signs
And
of,
what do those signs say?
Mean things?
Mean things.
oh yeah.
You're going to hell. You're going to die. You're terrible. What about homosexual community? What do they usually see from us?
Condemnation.
Condemnation, signs, you're going to hell, God hates you, yada, 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 yada. Does God love divorce? They'll see a bunch of signs outside of the courthouses saying, you're going to hell, you're going to burn because you're getting divorced. God hates divorce. He does not like it. Makes you an adulterer if you get married or divorced for the wrong reason. You could cause someone else to be an adulterer or an adulteress. That's what Jesus is actually going to say here in a chapter. And yet we don't hold sides against that. We like to talk to people who are coming out of bars and and scream in their face, you're drunks, you're going to hell, you're a drunkard. Got a lot of gossips in churches. I've seen a lot of gossips. A lot of people in churches looking at those young people. Oh, listen to that music they listen to. Yeah, well, your parents said it to you too. So.
Yes.
Yep. So are we being righteous and being persecuted?
Are we being righteous when we do that? No.
Right. So if they persecute us, are they persecuting us for righteousness?
Depends on what they're persecuting you
Wait a
about.
minute,
yeah.
are you
Right.
saying persecuting? Who are you talking about, the sign holder or the,
The sign holder is typically what? That's what they see. That's who they see.
right?
Do they see the people coming in and helping the homeless guy on the corner? No.
No.
They see the branches of our faith that go out and do all that nonsense, and in fact, that's heretical, horrible, disdainful things. Steve?
This is recent, but it's actually been persecuted from both sides. The commercials during the Super Bowl, the Christian commercials, were persecuted by secular people and Christian people. As far as the comments that I kept on seeing were, why spend millions on a commercial when you could be spending millions on helping the homeless and da-da-da-da-da.
Was
stuff
that
like
the one? I didn't see it.
It's called He Gets Us. He Gets Us.
Right. Is that the one where they're praying with certain people or something? Or
They were washing feet.
Oh,
well, that's
washing
what
the
yeah,
feet,
the
yes.
washing feet
That
thing.
was-
Washing the feet of
Yeah.
people.
But I was getting, I was seeing people from both sides criticizing it. So
Right.
it's fine, yeah, interesting to me.
Yeah, and to me, when I looked at it, there's of course two minds. All right, I always have the secular mindset of, okay, when they remove God from our schools, it's secular. Schools are secular. And if you promote one faith, guess what? You're going to have Satan clubs. If you promote Christianity, they can pray, Muslims can pray. If you have to salute the American flag, that's different because that's a part of our country. That's our country's flag. But then when you say prayer, then you have to include all prayer, including some very horrible things. So to me, I'd rather not have it than have everything be able to be, indoctrinated in that way. Yes, there's some terrible things in schools and parents are fighting against certain aspects of things, like you said, that are being taught to kids, and that's good. That's a good thing. I think that's very different than faith. You can use a level of faith, but I think decency comes into play there. But me, there's always that secular part to that says, do we really, you're putting that out to say that, oh, these things are okay, right? That to me hits me in that way, because I'm very aware of all that stuff that happens around. But then there's the Christian side of me that says, yeah, that's kind of what we ought to be doing. But then the pragmatic side says, yeah, why spend all the money? And, you know, am I going to go put something on the internet about that? I'm wasting like 5 minutes here talking about it. It's a thing. But when we do those things, yes, we can be persecuted. When I have said in the past to elders, why can't we be like the Acts church? If someone needs a place to live, bring them into your home. If someone needs food, share your food with them. If someone needs a car, you let them borrow a spare car you have. And people have said, well, you can't just live like that. Says who? That's a godly thing to do. What's wrong with that? And when people are constantly deriding you, that's the persecution. Not when they're screaming at us because we're holding signs up in front of clinics and things.
So why do people tell us not to feed the homeless out begging for money and not give them anything?
They do that, again, it's a systematic thing. It goes back to a time when churches took care of people, not governments. So now they want you to direct them to a shelter or something. Whereas, but here's
It's
this.
still the same thing.
No.
What would Jesus rather you do? Would Jesus rather you hand them $5 or say, hey, let me go take you, have a burger, and then take you to the place where I know you can have shelter? What does Jesus prefer?
The second one.
Second one. Why does Jesus prefer that?
Because you have that one-on-one relationship with them to share.
Showing them love.
What else? What else happens?
You have no idea if they're really homeless.
They could
You
do-
have no idea.
They could do something to you too.
They could do something to you too. In fact, my wife, I love her, when we first got together, that's what I would do. I would take people to Walmart or whatever and buy them groceries and then take. I was innocent of all of that. I didn't think of that. When the first guy got in my car, he had a very puffy jacket, and I said, now listen, you're getting in my car, do you have like needles or anything? He's like, no, bro. He's like, I just need food. We went to Walmart, got a bunch of food, and I got him to the bus station. That's what I did. And he still kept saying, oh, I need money. And I'm like, I'm not going to give you money, dude. I got you food. That's what you said you needed. And I got you to the bus station. That's what I did. And I left there, and I cried a little bit of like, why didn't I just take him to where he needed to go in Virginia Beach? But that was my heart. Very pure. That's a pure thing. When we have a thought of, what could they do to me? We immediately have made an imperfection in the purity of the heart. Don't do it. Because now your heart's not in the right place. If someone does something that's holy and worthy and takes someone into their home, say, and loves them, and that person murders them, did they do something right or wrong?
They still did right.
They still did right. Because you take that example and you apply it to Jesus. He came down here, what do we do? So when you think of right, don't think. A lot of people like to say, and I've heard this quite a bit from leaders and people who make budgets and all that organizational stuff. And they say, well, isn't it reasonable to be, smart about this and we should do this here and there? Sometimes you got to go, but what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do?
So the wrong thing is to not give them any money out on the street, on the side of the street.
The better thing would be is if you took them somewhere that they could get that help. If you don't have the means to, but you have a car and you have the means to go. But like I said, if you had that thought of what could they do to me, then don't. Don't. Because then you have that thought. But again, a lot of people say, oh, you should be smart. I would say to women, don't ever pick up anybody, to women. Guys, I think it's a little different. But again, this is upon you. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what to do. Again, if it's not based in faith, then it's sin. So if you go and do it because Russell said to do it, that's not right. No, I mean that. That's not right. Don't go, oh, Russell told me to get that guy. Don't do that. Okay, don't. I want it to come from here and say, you know what, hey, my neighbor's having some trouble, let me see if I can go help him, you know. Someone on the side of the road, you see someone else helping them, hey, do you guys need help? No, we're good. Okay, just a thought. I've pulled over at accident scenes and helped call 911, and actually nobody had called. When we did it the one time on Tidewater, no one had called. So we were the first ones there, and the lady was like screaming, and so we got 911 to come. So you never know, okay? You never know. But I think we have to be pure of heart in those and kind of not be aloof, but be understanding, but still there's a way to do what Jesus says. Yeah.
Yeah, let me, I love what the commentary says on verses 3 through 12 talk about. First of all, Romans 12, 1 and 2 is all about transforming your mind. As Christians, we don't think the same as the world do, and that's because of the biblical training and we have and all that. But it does say with Jesus' announcement that the kingdom was near, people were naturally asking, how do I qualify to be in God's kingdom? Jesus said that God's kingdom is organized differently from the worldly kingdom. In God's kingdom of heaven, wealth, power, authority are unimportant. Kingdom people seek different blessings and benefits, and they have different attitudes. And are your attitudes a carbon copy of the world's selfishness, pride, lust, and power, or do they reflect a humility and sacrifice of God? Jesus. Now, you know, going back with the Beatitudes is Galatians, the fruits of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. That's how you operate in the world when you train yourself to operate in the fruits of the Spirit. And the Bible says also, be a doer of the word and not hearers only. You can't walk around like this and like this mm-hmm. and like being a Christian, because you got to put your input into the world in order to help people to come to God, come to Jesus.
And I do think that when people see us doing holy things, yeah. A lot of times they say, oh, I wish more Christians were like that. There's the famous quote by Mahatma Gandhi about, I like your Jesus, or like your Christ, I don't like your Christians. You know, if we looked more like Christ doesn't go around condemning people. You know, the prostitute coming in and wiping his feet doesn't go, I know what you do, go away. He doesn't do that. He says, she's asking for forgiveness. You know, someone walks in these doors, and I was actually asked this question on a thing recently. Someone walks through these doors and they live a certain lifestyle. How do we respond to that? These are things we have to think about. How do we respond to that? We're getting to a point, several years ago, I saw something in Texas where the mayor asked all the preachers to submit their sermons for review by the city. That's persecution. Why are you telling preachers what to preach? If you don't think that's not coming more, it is. Changing little things on cups, that's not persecution. Persecution is going to be like the fella who was, he had cans of soup or something, and people were coming up for free to grab it, and the city came and arrested the guy. This was back in 2018 or something, before the pandemic. And they arrested him because they said that he was doing some health code violation thing. And we go, really? You have places like Food Line and Kroger and all this where they take their food and they throw it in the dumpster when it's just been out for a day. There are people who can eat that, and yet because of all these health code things, they can't. Now that goes into legal stuff and secularism, but at the same time, don't we do the same thing sometimes? You know? It's easy for us to just buy one more can of a thing and then give it somewhere. That's easy. It's $1 something. You find it on sale. In Ohio, it's a little different. You don't have as much secular influence. So the football team would go to a church and they always had a lunch before a game. And they pray on the field before the game, and there was no persecution of that. And we were able to put up in front of the sheriff's office, interestingly enough, a box that was called the Blessings Box. And all sorts of dry goods and canned goods could be put in there that are shelf stable, and people would come and get them for free. Now, of course, the money doesn't go anywhere near as far as it did back when we did it in 2017, but yet the thought's still the same. It didn't matter who took it. You don't know who's taking it, but the idea is that you're pure of heart, and you're putting it in there saying, I'm doing what I know is right to do. Yes, there are things better, but that's not the point. Starting very small with saying, this is something I can do very simply. That's a godly thing. There's going to come a time where we're going to be persecuted just for that. There's going to come a time, even back during the pandemic, where churches weren't allowed to meet together. I'll tell you what, that whole thing where they would be outside or they'd do it online or cars, that's bunk. I ain't doing that. I still met in a church with a church that was kind of off the radar. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. And I'd rather be arrested because I'm meeting with the body against your regulations, because that's what I know is right. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I'll just go online and do whatever. Oh, I'll sit in my car and honk my horn and pray for Jesus. Why? Because I know what's right to do in that. I'm going to embrace people, even though they say, oh, wear a mask. If that person wants me to, I will. But if that person doesn't want me to, and they want to hug, you hug them. All of these things, that was kind of like a trial run to seeing how much Christians will waive, how much will let it go. It's just going to get worse as we go. But I want you to be mindful. There's a difference between poking sinners in the chest and washing their feet, to use a contemporary example.
I like the analogy, excuse me, Russell. I like the analogy you said, mentioned something about a football team. You know, a football team, they learn the game plan. So when they got the game plan down pat, they go out on the field and they play the game. Well, the same token, this is our game plan for Christians. This is our how to operate in the world. We know the game plan, and we go out into the world, and we operate according to the way Jesus wants us, and God wants us according to our game plan.
I've heard that the huddle is church on Sunday, you know, the get together, and then the game is going out in the world. The best part is we're not limited to how many people we can put on the field. But you don't want to be a bench sitter, you know. But real quickly, the next verse there, 11, blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you. Again, now he's doubling down on the last verse there. He's doubling down on what he just said. Persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me, because of Jesus. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in this same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Now, we have the blesseds, and we have the for there something. The first one, how do you become blessed in these terrible conditions? Where does the blessing come from? Say it again.
It always comes from God.
It always comes from God. Comforted. If you need mercy, if you're poor in spirit. The opposite of these things, if you're persecuting people, if you're being judgmental, if you're being evil in heart, all of these things are complete opposite of godly characteristics. And when you're poor in spirit and you're persecuted, and when you're pure in heart, and when you need to give mercy because it costs you something, or when you hunger and thirst for righteousness, or when you're humble or gentle, or when you mourn, all of these things can only be filled by God. The second half. What's the fulfillment of all of these things? If you are these things, what happens?
You go to heaven. Be with God.
You're fulfilling Christ's commands. God rewards you for that. Are any of these physical? Are any of these physical things? Can you be a peacemaker when it doesn't start here? Can you be pure in heart? It doesn't start here. All of these things have a root, a seed inside here. You're not going to seek God when you're poor in spirit unless it starts here. And then sometimes it manifests. We have a high suicide rate among a lot of people. Think of transgender people. The suicide rate is enormous amongst those people. Not only do they not see love and compassion from their families, they don't see it from the church. They're people who need help. They're people who need help here. And they're hurt here. And they end up hurting themselves physically. A lot of times when we're persecuted, it starts here. It hurts us here. And then sometimes we fight back in the wrong way. These are spiritual matters. Heart matters. Will matters. And the reward for doing these things that cost us so much, when we're persecuted and don't fight back, when we're mourning, when we're sore in our spirit, when we're poor and we're hurting, when we want to be filled with righteousness, and it's so hard to do in the dark world, these things can only come from God, and we can only be filled by Him. He's the only one who's going to give it to us. And if you do these things, the reward is not here. It's not here. You're going to get persecuted. You're going to have times where it's hard to show mercy. You're going to be poor in the spirit because of the things that happen. Imagine in my generation, perhaps, as I get older, that people I know in the church getting jailed, that churches are actively being shut down by a secular government. When these things happen, they happen across the world. They just don't happen here yet. Yet. And when they come, all of these things, I'm going to be experiencing all of these things. And yet we have to look to Christ. We have to look to God in all these things, because it's not about here. It's not about here. It's about there. That's why when Jesus says all these things, He doesn't say, I'm going to make sure that you're fortunate now. No, He talks about everything in the future. Because it's not happening now. Because this is a fallen world, and we're not inheriting a fallen world. We're going to get something heavenly and better. And I want you to remember that in all the trials, that that's what it's about, the future, not the present. Does anyone have anything else on that? All right, next week we're going to move into the other sermons. I do encourage you to really, really, really read the Sermon on the Mount several times. Let it sink in. Let it kind of eat at you, the different things that are said, okay? And I'll see you next week.
All right.
Thank you.
Good job, Russell.
Yeah.